on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here for our round 1 prize picks targets for the Memorial Tournament. It's at Jack's Place, Muirfield Village. It's a legendary track, of course. Anytime you have the Golden Bear as the host, you're going to get a star-studded field. And this week, we have both the star-studded field and, of course, a venue that's a star of its own. It's a tough track, a par 72 that plays over par, some extremely tricky greens to deal with, some 4-inch rough. In general, everything we could ask for as a golf fan. It's as close to a major championship as we're going to get without actually being at one of those 4 events. Kind of similar to a Players' Championship type of feel. So in terms of being a golf fan, it's a good week to be one. So in this video, I'll be going over my top 5 props here for the first round, but also some of the research and my thought process into making that type of card. So we'll talk about what we saw last year in terms of some of the fairway percentages, GAR percentages, average score. We'll talk about some of the weather expected here for Thursday, and then we'll wrap it up with our 5-leg flex card here for the first round. So a lot to talk about, a lot to touch on here for Thursday. Let's go ahead and hop right on in. We'll begin with a review of last year's event, where you can see the scoring average was about a shot over par, 0.97 shots to be exact, which for a par 72 is extremely difficult. You have 4 par 5s for players to take advantage of, a few par 4s that are less than 430 yards, so you'd expect there to be some birdie production, but with the difficulty on these greens, the 4-inch rough that you have around Muirfield Village, it's a hard task to even get in under par, even with all of those gettable holes to take advantage of. So despite its format, its layout, it is going to play as a difficult track, and you can see even the driving accuracy isn't all that hard to come by here. About 70.2% of fairways were hit in 2021, and even the GAR percentage, which was just 61.4%, was only about 7% less than the tour average. So a lot of that difficulty isn't necessarily so much from the ball striking side. Of course, the green's a little bit harder to hit. That's going to add some difficulty. It's more that when you miss the greens here, or even when you're on the greens at Muirfield Village, you're dealing with a whole lot of trouble. Greens that are usually running extremely fast. Now in 2021, that wasn't necessarily the case, but from everything we've heard from Jack Nicklaus so far, that is not going to be the case this time. He fully intends to run these greens a lot faster than what we saw last time, and with the new sub-air system that has been completely finished and rounded off now for here in 2022, I'd expect him to have full control over the state of these greens. So the scoring average could very well actually go up from the 0.97 average to something closer to 1.5 shots over par. I mean, if they make these greens even more difficult, which is what we're used to seeing at this tournament over the years, you're looking at an even harder golf course. So from a skill set perspective, looking for guys that are relatively well-rounded. You can see with some of the correlations down here, there's a huge emphasis on short game, right around the green, and putting is up there in the top 2 and 3. Shots gained approach is always going to be number 1, but if anything, there is a slight de-emphasis on the off the tee play here. You can see driving distance is not that important at all here, and even driving accuracy slightly less important at Muirfield Village than it is at other tracks. With the weather forecast, it's a little bit early to look at it, given that it's just here on a Tuesday, but for Thursday, you're looking at relatively benign conditions, something in that 8 to 10 mile an hour range when it comes to the sustained gusts, and then the actual wind gusts themselves, not really there in the morning, right? 8 to 10 miles an hour, that's, hardly a wind gust at all. But in the afternoon, particularly towards 4 to 5 p.m., there is a little bit of a storm coming through, which could bring upwards of 15 to 20 mile an hour gusts. So if there was going to be any sort of advantage here on Thursday, it would be towards the AM side, the guys that are teeing off in the morning. But given that we don't even have tee times yet this early on a Tuesday, not anything that we can act on. But with that being said, I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the matchup side of things with prize picks. So from an AM-PM split sort of thing, it's not going to be a huge deal, right? We're talking about non-individual statistic like fairways or GIR, which can be heavily impacted by conditions. Usually when you're dealing with players in a matchup, especially something where it's a birdie matchup, not even with strokes, it's a little bit more immune to the weather splits that you might see with some of the other props. So with that being said, let's talk about my 5 props here. So the first one we'll touch on will be Cameron Smith, who's the over against Keegan Bradley when it comes to the birdie matchup. Now, if you're new to this category, you're essentially just betting on who makes more birdies. If they end up making the same amount, prop would be exactly that, a push. So for Cameron Smith, one of the best birdie or better percentage players on all of the PGA Tour, matched up against Keegan Bradley, who is a great ball striker, but he really struggles with the flat stick. And that's why his birdie or better percentage is nowhere near where it should be. I mean, from an opportunity standpoint, the fact that he's getting himself in the fairway so often, hitting so many greens, you'd expect Keegan to make a ton of birdies, but that isn't the case because of that flat stick. On the other side of things, you have Cameron Smith, perhaps the best putter that we have on all of the tour. So when it comes to the matchup here, it is a no-brainer for me. In fact, it's right around a 13% edge for a Cameron Smith in terms of success rates. So, well above a lot of the other props that we're used to seeing here on the board, which makes it one of my favorite props to get to here for the first round. Next up, we have the Jordan Spieth prop, where he's matched up against Jason Day. It's actually my second favorite prop on the slate. You have Jordan Spieth, who's one of the higher birdie or better percentage players, another extremely aggressive player, kind of like a Cameron Smith. And anytime we get a birdie prop on him, I'm always trying to slam the over on both of those players, but particularly when they're matched up against relatively conservative players. I mean, Keegan Bradley, I told you about his issues with the flat stick. Jason Day is just a little bit of a passive mindset. He plays extremely passive when it comes to play style. He's not going to be taking aim at every single pin. He doesn't have that firepower that he used to off the tee. Now he's, average when it comes to his off the tee stats. And for him to be matched up against Jordan Spieth, who, as of right now is in the top 5 in terms of betting odds, the recent form has been unbelievable for Spieth. The shots gained metrics are just, especially from tee to green, are on another level at this point. He should be matched up with somebody like a Cameron Smith, right? If you had Cam Smith and Jordan Spieth as the matchup here, I think that'd be a lot harder to choose from, opposed to, Keegan Bradley against Cam. And then over here we have Jason Day, well past his prime, dealing with back issues up against an informed Jordan Spieth. So for me, it's a no-brainer, right around a 12% edge right there, and something that I'll be including in plenty of my cards. My third favorite pick is going to be the Rory McIlroy matchup going against Keith Mitchell. And while Keegan Bradley and Jason Day were a little bit conservative, Keith Mitchell is a little bit more aggressive. So that's why I'm a little bit less confident in this pick than I was the top 2, but it is still my top 3 pick on the board because I still have it at a 10% edge, which is significant. I mean, with Rory McIlroy, we know he's a world-class player, and this recent stretch of form that he's on, you could argue it's the best stretch of form he's ever been on. And I know it hasn't really translated to wins, but it's been top 10 finish after top 10 finish over the past 4 to 5 starts. He's gone very consistent with every shots gained category. He's gaining off the tee, on approach, around the green, and with the putter, which for Rory McIlroy, you'd expect him to be gaining in at least 3 of those 4 categories. But when he's firing on all cylinders, all 4 cylinders, this is somebody who could win week in and week out. So the fact that he's, could have easily been matched up against somebody like a Jon Rahm, a Cam Smith, or a Jordan Spieth, and we probably would have had to think about it, but now it's a Keith Mitchell, right? Like I said, he's an aggressive player, but in terms of pedigree, nowhere near the same level of player. You're talking about somebody who's in that 50 to 100 range in terms of official world golf ranking, up against somebody like Rory, who's perennially within the top 10, one of the best players, period, that we've ever had in our game. Multiple major championship winner. We're talking about dozens of wins on the PGA Tour. He's only going to add to that over the years. Just a no-brainer pick for us here. I know it's not a lock, right? None of these matchups are a lock, as was evidenced last week, where we took Scotty Scheffler over Davis Riley, and he got beat by 3 birdies. But if you're telling me that over a 100-round sample size, we could play these same bets over and over and over again, I'm going to be all over it, right? Have it right around a 60% range of actually hitting. So love Rory McIlroy there and that birdie or better matchup. One of my favorite bets on the board. Next up, we have Xander Schauffele. He's matched up against Siwoo Kim, and he's another aggressive player. So in terms of pedigree, he's on the same level as a Cam Smith or Jordan Spieth. I just think the matchup's a little bit tougher. So first off, Xander Schauffele coming in with form. He won at the Zurich Classic, a few other top 25 finishes to boot since then, including a pretty impressive performance his last time out. In terms of his recent form, right, he's gaining across the board, gaining across all 4 categories. I expect his skill set to really, translate to this golf course. He's somebody who, with that well-rounded game, no matter what situation you put him in, he's going to be better than his peers, which at difficult tracks, major championships, That's why you see him towards the top of leaderboards. That shouldn't really be a surprise to us. So Siwoo Kim, it's not really a knock against him as much as, how much I like Xander Schauffele this week. But Siwoo Kim, also a little bit more of a par machine than a birdie machine. When he's firing on all cylinders, Siwoo Kim can take a place low like no other, but most of the time he's going out there and he's a little bit better at saving himself. He's a very solid around the green player and very, very skilled at scrambling when he gets out of trouble. So from a DFS perspective, I don't hate Siwoo Kim this week, but from a birdie or better matchup perspective, absolutely have to love Xander Schauffele here. An elite level player matched up against a mid-tier player, I'm going to take that all day. So yet another matchup that we're slamming the over on here. And lastly, we have the Jon Rahm prop, which he's against Davis Riley. And, I prefaced it before with, Scotty Scheffler got absolutely bamboozled by Davis Riley last week. He lost by 3 birdies in a matchup. That's because he's a high birdie or better percentage player. But this week, I'm willing to look past her. I'm not going to let that one instance hold me off of him. Jon Rahm is clearly the better player here. He's a great skill set fit. He's won at this golf course. He should have won last year. It'd be hard not to ride the Jon Rahm train at this point. He's coming in with form, gaining a ton of strokes off the tee. And I know he wasn't his best self at the PGA Championship, but he at least still made the cut, right? He was still in the top half of players there, was gaining off the tee. Maybe not his best self with the putter, but on these greens that he's had so much success on in the past, what's to say that he doesn't flip that around this week? And in a 50-50 matchup against a inferior player like a Davis Riley, who, I think the world of a Davis Riley. He's a very high upside play, young up-and-coming type of talent. But to say that he's in a matchup against Jon Rahm, a top 3 player in the world, it's a no-brainer pick for us, right? It's nothing against these guys that they're matched up against. They're just not the same level of players. So for me, those are the 5 picks I'm going with. Because this is a matchup prop, there are no multipliers to worry about. It's treated just like an NBA or a tennis slate would. So you are getting 10x value for this 5-leg card. If you wanted to take one out and run a 4-leg power, I'd be okay with that too. Of course, the payout is also still 10x if you go that direction. But in either circumstance, absolutely love this card for the first round. And if it ends up hitting, I know a lot of people are playing these props this week. We might not see this category much longer, right? The edges are so big on these. It's just, I have a feeling when the site gets hit by this, once or twice, when they end up cashing out, which they're inevitably going to with the odds that we have on these, they're going to take them down. They're probably not going to offer them anymore. And I don't want to speak for the company. Again, I don't work for them as a lines maker, but just seems like there's some massive edges to be had here. So certainly going to be entering quite a few cards here for the first round, and hopefully we can take home something big. All right, that's all I've got for this week's Prize Picks preview. Before you hop on out of here, let me know what your favorite prop on the board is for round 1, and also go ahead and let me know why. I always love to hear from you guys. Like to hear your thoughts on the slate. So make sure you go ahead and comment that down below. And as per usual, we'll have content out for rounds 2 through 4. So expect that to drop after the round on Thursday. Same thing for Friday and Saturday. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I would highly recommend you go ahead and do so you don't miss any of that content when it drops in the future. If you haven't already hit that like button, make sure you do that too. I appreciate all the support here, guys. Best of luck with all of your slips here for the first round, and let's get this cash.